this is Nick from Breaker Press Games, and in this episode of DCC Basics, we're going to talk about morale. Alright, before we get to the subject at hand, if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and comment down below. You know the drill. It helps in the algorithms, all that stuff. Additionally, if you want to support Breaker Press Games further, you can pick up Breaker Press Games content on the Goodman Games web store, Exalted Funeral, and through the Breaker Press web store. In fact, we got a bunch of cool stuff that just appeared in the web store. We have the fourth printing. Yes, the fourth printing of The Precipice of Corruption. It's a small printing. Brand new. Latest adventure, Tragedy at Woodwitch Rise. And then for pre-order right now, I have Peculiar NPCs, which is a deck of 54 portraits. So yeah, check that stuff out in the links below. And finally, if you want to really support Breaker Press Games in the best way possible, become a member on Patreon. If you become a patron, you get access to content that is a work in progress. Right now, the last few posts have been relating to Stennard Courier Volume 2, and I've been featuring the different NPCs and the rules and the lore, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's great stuff if you're interested in my grimdark survival horror setting of Stennard. So check that out. And you can be a member for free. But if you become a member at $6 and above, you get cool stuff in the mail every month, like pamphlets, and class guides, that sort of thing. Yes, I did those in the reverse order, but that's cool. All right, so let's talk about morale. Not all monsters fight to the death. Some flee or surrender. And that's from page 94 of the DCC rulebook. Monsters, retainers, and NPCs should make morale checks. Now, this is something that I think a lot of judges overlook. I know I definitely overlooked it for the first couple of years that I was running DCC. I never made a morale check. I basically assumed that everybody fought to the death. Yeah, then after enough combats that were a slog, I realized, hey, I should probably have these monsters roll to see if they run away, if they're getting mulched. So let's talk about how DCC actually says to utilize morale. So a morale check is made in the case of monsters or a group of monsters when the first creature is killed and when half have been killed or incapacitated. In the case of a single monster, and it doesn't specifically state this, but I'm assuming enemy NPCs, when it has lost half of its hit points. And in the case of retainers, and those are hirelings hired by the PCs, hirelings and henchmen, when they first encounter combat or danger. Because it's important to note that sometimes danger is telegraphed in the form of a trap or what have you. Think of it in terms of the opening sequence of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when Indy is going through the jungle and they encounter like the idols outside of the cave, and people immediately turn and start fleeing. And his group gets whittled down as they get closer and closer to the actual cave that he swaps the idol at. Yes, think of it in those terms. So retainers when they first encounter combat or danger. And additionally, retainers you roll at the end of an adventure. And we're going to talk more about that, because that is then, instead of being on page 94, you got to find that information on page 310. So the morale check is a DC 11 will save. Now then, if the monster or retainer fails, they will attempt to flee combat. Retainers may also use their employer's personality modifier. It's interesting that they put those in that order in the book. Yeah, retainers are going to be able to utilize their personality modifier of their employers. Page 94 also suggests that judges may use modifiers ranging from -4 to +4 for a variety of circumstances, like convincing a goblin slave to turn on their master, or a mama bear protecting their cubs. So obviously mama bear protecting their cubs would probably get a +4 modifier to their morale, whereas a goblin slave trying to convince them to turn on their masters, that's probably a -4 for their will save. I also would like to suggest that in circumstances like that, you might want to use, instead of strict modifiers, use the dice chain. That's part of what it's for. So, keep that in mind. It's at judge's discretion. Okay, so additionally, some monsters like undead or golems might ignore morale checks completely, and this is not always clearly stated in the monster description. So once again, you're going to need to use your discretion. So real quick, because I didn't put it in the script, I'm going to grab the book itself, talking about morale and hirelings, retainers, and followers. So, as covered in the combat section, a retainer must check morale in their first encounter. It is quite possible that they will run away, realizing what they're up against. Unlike with normal monsters, the retainer is affected by loyalty to their employer. A retainer's morale check is modified by their will save and by their employer's personality modifier. At the end of each adventure, a retainer may make another morale check, or must make another morale check. The judge applies a modifier of -4 to +4, reflecting the retainer's wounds, their treatment at the hands of the characters, their payment and share of the treasure, and the party's general success. A retainer who fails their morale check is spooked by a life of adventurer and chooses to return to the toil of the village life. Now, I wouldn't necessarily go with that strictly. In my case, in the setting of Stennard, there is a rival party that's always dogging the PCs, and so I might have the retainers jump ship and go over to the rival party. So, overall, morale is a really useful tool because it ensures that your combats are not a slog. When you're running an adventure, you're going to have circumstances where you've got a bunch of monsters, and it might make sense for those monsters to stay and fight, depending on your idea behind how they're treated by the NPC, how fervent they are in their goals, etc., etc. But in most circumstances, you should, when the first monster is killed, and when half of the monsters are killed, have them make a roll. Additionally, in an adventure like The Precipice of Corruption, where you have a bunch of small groups of monsters, you can have them flee and reappear later. Have them mob up with the group behind them, or have them, start, in that particular adventure, there are little hideaway crevices that they can pop out of, and so. Think how the monsters would treat the situation if they were fighting for their life. So, in some cases, you're going to have these monsters flee and never see them again. But in other circumstances, you're going to have them flee, but have them come back, more dangerous than before, because they're gonna smarten up. So keep those things in mind. As always, it is up to your discretion. So that is my overview of morale. If you have any questions, or you have suggestions for different topics for me to cover, I love taking suggestions from people in the comments, or on the different groups like DCC Rocks on Facebook, or on the DCC Reddit. So yeah, this particular topic was brought to you by viewers like you. So thank you for supporting indie games and indie game designers. This is Nick from Breaker Press Games, signing off.